Hola chicos, en este screencast, en este video, vamos a hablar de verbos en el presente, los regulares, so regular present tense verbs. Bueno, primero quiero explicar algunas cosas. La palabra regular, la palabra present, la palabra tense y la palabra verbs. Do we know what all those things mean? Regular just means that they are conjugated regularly, so they are not irregular. Irregular verbs are exceptions, so nosotros hoy no vamos a hablar de irregulares. Present means now. These are things that happen now. When we use the present tense, we talk about things that are happening now or in the present time. Doesn't have to be at this particular moment. We could say, yo voy a la clase de español. Yo hablo español. I go to Spanish class. I speak Spanish. These are things that are happening presently. Tense. A tense just refers to a time. When you see the word tense, just think time. So in this case, we're talking about present tense, present time. Finally, verb is an action, right? This should be most a review. So we're talking about actions. So there's our little review on what regular present tense verbs are. So, anatomy of a verb. Nosotros ya sabemos en español este verbo, por ejemplo, hablar quiere decir to speak or to talk. In English, we have to put this to in front of it to make it the infinitive sound. In Spanish, when we have the ending here, this AR, and particularly the R, when a word ends in an R, it's generally going to be a verb. So the anatomy of this verb, this is the infinitive form of the verb. Infinitive. And what the infinitive means is that it's the basic form of the verb that you'd look up in the dictionary. In order to use this verb, we have to conjugate it, a scary word. Conjugate just means put it in the right forms. Tell us who's speaking. If I say yo hablar, that means I to speak, and it doesn't make any sense. So that's what conjugating is. In order to conjugate, we have two parts of this verb generally. If we take this part, everything before the AR, this is called the root of the verb. And then the rest of the verb, the AR, this is called the ending. This happens to be an AR ending verb. And so we use the root of the verb to attach appropriate endings on to be able to tell who is speaking. For example, yo hablo. So there's our little review of the anatomy of the verb. All right, conjugating a verb. Now, we all are familiar with those little columns and how we conjugate, but we have to know how conjugating works. Generally, we put them in two columns. We conjugate verbs in two columns. Now, conjugating is overrated, to be honest with you. Conjugating is something that if it's done in a vacuum, if it's done by itself, it doesn't really help us in any way. We need to understand how it works. So the singular column over here has our singular subject pronouns. These are our subject pronouns. Yo, tú, él, ella, and usted are all going to be one particular form of the verb, and we'll come back to that in a second. Plural, we talk about more than one person. Nosotros, meaning we. Vosotros, meaning you all, the plural of you. And then the third person plural, ellos, ellas, ustedes. So that means that we have 6 different verb conjugations. Okay, so the yo form of the verb is going to be one particular conjugation, the to form, and the ele usted form, etc. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between this, usted and ella and él. This is really important. Él means he, ella means she, and usted means you. Oh, but I thought tú means you. Well, yes, you, familiar. When you're talking to friends, okay, or family, or people you know well, you use the tú form. And in Spanish, we have this you formal form. When you're talking to somebody who's older than you that you don't know well, you use this usted form. What does that mean? That means if you use the usted form, you have to use the ending in this category here in order to conjugate the verb. So the difference between tú and usted is important. Also, people have a tendency to confuse usted and ella and él. These are what they mean, okay? Similarly, on the other side here, we have this confusing vosotros. Vosotros really is only, well, not only, but generally used in Spain. I don't use it very often. When I want to talk about you guys, I use this form, ustedes, which means I use the conjugation of the verb in here to use it. Now, there's also common confusion between ustedes and ellos and ellas. Okay, so ellos is your word for they. Ellas is also your word for they. The difference is that this they would be all feminine, right? All girls, for example. Oops, sorry about that, feminine. And this one, they, could be all masculine, all guys, or it could be a combination. Spanish is very macho, no? El machismo in Espanol is a word for it. Machoism, el machismo. And even if you have one guy and 30 girls, it's still, unfortunately for the girls, going to be the masculine form that predominates. So you use ellos unless there's all girls involved. Ustedes, and this is kind of the point of this, means you all. Ustedes does not mean they. So this is commonly confused. People think ellos and ustedes are the same. They don't know the difference. In my experience, this is what the difference is, and this is what you guys need to know about this. Okay, so I'm going to end this screencast here because we're going on to 6 minutes. This is very basic, but I expect you guys to understand the differences between the forms and the anatomy of the verbs. Muchas gracias por su atención. Nos vemos en la próxima clase. Chao.